Well met, stranger. Sharpen knowledge sword. Virtual dice. Fact of the day. Visit Strumpet. Wash me. Roll virtual dice. Consulting my orb, I scry a winner. My liege, the riches of the kingdom are yours.
Whatever is this you hold in your hand? Is it some sort of medieval shield? Perchance a buckler? Nay, 'tis a CD-ROM. Hey, sorry I'm late. Sorry, I'm coming. Sorry I'm late. Sorry I'm late. Hi. I'm just, oh my God. Triangle Agency is an award-winning new tabletop role-playing game of comedy, mostly, and about activism and resistance, maybe, in a modern-day corporate workplace where your players are going to be employed as basically thought police in a world where thoughts are sentient and superpowered and need to be arrested, but where they might also turn you inside out. It plays something like if the video game Control was written by the team behind Steven Universe, and it looks like this, and it comes in a gorgeous collector's edition that looks like this, which has special dice that look like this. And my God, if these aren't my favorite dice to come bundled with a TTRPG ever. Lovely colors, high contrast so we can read them with ease. Even in the dignified low lighting that I like to play my TTRPGs in, a sexy font, an eyeball in the D12 for fun and for other secret reasons, because this is a TTRPG rulebook with spoilers. An entire corporate handbook of them, in fact. However, this reviewer is not convinced that the, I'll say it, indecorous quality of these official dice makes up for the fact that the dice pool you're going to be rolling in Triangle Agency to see if you succeed is trying to get as many 3s as possible on 6d4. D4s being the worst, most unsatisfying dice in existence for no reason other than Triangle Agency is committed to the bit. Because you see, D4s are made up of triangles, and the numbers 3 and 6 are both divisible by 3, which is the number of sides a triangle has. And I hate it. Because unless you own the official D4s with their highlighted 3s, rolling a pool of 64 and looking for 3s feels like looking through the fur of a family pet, looking for lice. It's simply the worst dice pool of all time, but man, you and I gotta lock in. We got a review to do. So, Triangle Agency is an endlessly funny TTRPG with my favorite pitch that I've encountered in years. I actually first thought it was a parody of Delta Green when I first read it, which I reviewed back in Season 2, Episode 1, and turns out it's not, but it could be. Let's get some more water. Ow. Hit my knee. Triangle Agency says to a table of players, hey, would you guys like to step into the business shoes of a squad of cool field agents with the mission of stabilizing reality by hunting down anomalies that you're going to try and capture in a briefcase and then take back to HQ where they can be safely stowed in a vault? But where a lot of TTRPGs would end their pitch there, content with letting players feel good about themselves, Triangle Agency then says, also, this is the worst, most corporate job you've ever had, and you can never leave because your player character is also an anomaly, granting you unique, cool powers to fight and survive, but also, if we're being honest, making you a narc. But don't worry, you're definitely working for the good guys. Definitely. Let's crack open this corporate handbook and begin your induction. In the words of the Triangle Agency book, the universe was not meant to be observed. It goes on to explain a secret of existence, kept quiet from just about every human on the planet, which is that when sentient beings have thoughts, powerful thoughts can manifest as beings known as anomalies that seek to perpetuate that thought. For instance, if someone really wants peace and quiet, maybe they can bring into existence a horrifying SCP-like thing that starts making things quiet however it can, perhaps initially by breaking any nearby speaker systems before graduating to the more enterprising objective of hunting down organic things in the neighborhood and stopping those noisy heartbeats of theirs. At which point, Triangle Agency might hear reports of paranormal activity and bundle the players into a company car to go and investigate what's happening, find out why it's happening, and ultimately coax Slenderman here into your briefcase and into the vault. The problem for the player characters, well, one problem in your diverse and inclusive rainbow of problems, is that they are what are called resonants. People who have bonded with an anomaly and have superpowers ranging from the soothingly silly to the seriously sinister that are maybe the best thing about this game. Like, if you choose the dream anomaly, you can step into paintings, photographs, videos, novels, or other pieces of art and explore them or manipulate them. Or you can just make people fall asleep. Though each time you fail a roll, one of your friends might fall asleep instead. Or like, oh my god, check this out. If you go with the whisper, one of your powers is to respond to a spoken sentence with the phrase, "Say again?" and tell the group what the target said instead, and that becomes reality. Although if you fail the roll, for the next 3 hours, you can only speak in words in the sentence you intended for them. As anomalies, the only reason that Triangle Agency hasn't locked you in their ever-threatening business vault is that you are useful for capturing other anomalies. Does that make you a collaborator? Don't think about it. Don't think about it. Also, don't form a union. That's on page 56, where the agency adds that if 2 employees develop a meaningful relationship, that will be considered a union. Also, don't forget to file your paperwork after each mission. I love this. This is a game where the GM will reward players after each mission based on not just how they performed, but how accurate their paperwork is. Historically, so much of TTRPG history has seen this hobby acting as a nerd power fantasy, and I'm telling you, we got it backwards. Triangle Agency does give players a ton of power, like one of my players' abilities was just to delete an NPC, and that motherfucker did it all the time, but it alternates between the players and the GM being buffeted around by their respective issues like napkins in a wind tunnel. I'm telling you, with the right group, and maybe a few adult beverages, this game is side-splittingly funny. The players aren't even full-time field agents. That's just something you're called up by the agency to do during emergencies. The rest of the time, your character might be a barista in the company cafe with a special rule for that player. Each time you say somebody's name correctly, receive 1 demerit. I struggle to think of one simple rule in RPG that's brought me and my friends more joy than that. Or if a player chooses to be the CEO of their branch of Triangle Agency, it says, each time you take an order, receive 1 demerit. You have not lived until you've seen one player at your table say to the CEO, why don't you get out of the car? And then that player can't get out of the car because that would be an order. So instead they say, I think I'm gonna get out of the car. And I love it. That said, more than any other game that I've reviewed on Quinns Quest, the precise kind of experience Triangle Agency is going to be will be down to you. Let me draw you something. Let's imagine the tone of your game plotted on a graph. So your player characters are going to be very normal people with superpowers. So how much you focus on them being normal or superheroes is up to you. But in addition to your missions to save the world, this game is also interested in your mundane home life and office job. So you could be more normal people saving the world or superheroes in an office. And then popping our graph out into a whopping 3 dimensions, you can play Triangle Agency as a game with serious themes of relationships and duty and betrayal. Or you might do what I did and read this book and assume it's a comedy, a farce, a parody, where even the players' bosses at Triangle Agency are clearly in over their head. So if you organize a campaign of this, I think you could end up anywhere in this cube. So if you lean into this being a surreal workplace comedy, Triangle Agency could feel like Ghostbusters. If you lean into the metaphysical horror, it could feel like Severance. If you like straightforward superheroes, it could feel like a silly X-Men. Or if you're into your postmodern superheroics like I am, it could play a bit like the Umbrella Academy or even a light-hearted Chainsaw Man. So, this all feels like a cool game, right? Well, I'm gonna spoil my conclusion of this review early. I'm gonna give you your dessert as a main course. So I ran a campaign of Triangle Agency with 4 players. That's the Quinns Quest guarantee. I always play full campaigns of the games I review before I start writing the script. And I was about 6 evenings in when I told my players, cool, before we start playing tonight, guys, I've got a bit of an announcement. Running this game is causing me too much stress. If it's okay with everybody, I would like to maybe just run a couple more evenings of it and then move on so we can play a different RPG. So you'd think that means I think Triangle Agency is a bad game. But no, Because when I told my players this, they said to me, "Say what? But Quinns, this is the funniest game we've ever played with you. But I guess the GM needs to have fun too, so we can wrap this campaign up." I don't know why I did that voice. But wait, there's another twist here, because when we met up the next week to play our final finale of Triangle Agency, because that's just good practice, it's always a million times better to do like an ending session of a campaign you want to wrap up, rather than have the story just stop. That final session of Triangle Agency that we played was one of the best sessions I've run of any TTRPG. It was so good that today we don't even look back on our campaign of Triangle Agency as a failure, only with this intense fondness. And also, I don't want to run it again. Please get it away from me, please and thank you. How is it possible that my players were having such a good time while I wasn't? Well, now I've fed you your main course, I hope you're ready for another longer main course of nuance. The thing is, Triangle Agency is at once brilliant and maddening. It's impressive and incoherent. It is an edifice of magnificent, thought-provoking architecture, and it is also dumb. Brief side note here, for like 10 years, people have been asking me, "Quinns, would you ever design a game?" And my pithy answer that's been worn smooth by time is, "Are you kidding? Do you know how hard making a good game is?" And that is true, but the slightly more real answer is that at different times I have been offered jobs by companies that can be relied upon to make really strong games. It's just that there is additionally a part of game design that I know I wouldn't get on with. And it works like this. When you're making a game, you have a concept, and then you build it, and then you put it in front of people, and then you realize it has problems, and then you try and fix those problems, then you put it in front of people, and then you do this loop as many times as it takes until you go mad or run out of money or time or to give, and then you release the game if you can, or you don't. And this bit, that is where the real work is done. Now, having ideas, yeah, I'll have ideas all day long. But iteration, this bit, the juice, that requires patience and humility. Two things your boy Quinns was at the back of the queue for when they were being handed out. And now, I mean this with love and a fair bit of ego, but in this respect, Triangle Agency feels like a game designed by me. To be clear, I could never have in a million years have overseen the production of objects as gorgeous as these. I could never have overseen this layout or art design. I couldn't have written a book this consistently funny, but I could see myself creating a game with dozens of superstar ideas. But do they work, Quinns? I don't know. I have left the office early and I'm in a TGI Fridays drinking huge bleach-colored cocktails and it's new. So, in honor of Triangle Agency's commitment to the bit, where every 3 in this book is shaded red for no reason, let's divide this review in 3. In part 1 of this review, I'm going to talk about the actual missions that players go on, some pre-written ones being available by the publishers in a book called The Vault. In part 2, I'm going to talk about what happens between missions, which is playing out everyone's disastrous home lives. And in part 3, I'm going to talk about the stonking 90 pages in the back of this book of unlockable secrets that are figuratively, but also literally, Triangle Agency's biggest innovation. But first, I don't know what's happened. I put this cap on and I've gone mental. We all love Quinns. Plotting, I plan the quickest. NPCs are the sickest. My books are the thickest. My plots, the stickiest. But what if you want more Quinns in your life? The answer to that used to be the official Quinns Quest magazine, which, and I've always said this, combined the rigor of print journalism with the warm poetry of British literature for both of its issues before it was cancelled. We never fulfilled our promise of letting you collect your own 18-piece dice bag. That's my cross to bear, and I do so with stoic dignity. But as one door closes, another opens, and today the Quinns Quest fan club is available online for just $4, and that's fine too. Honestly, over at patreon.com/Quest, we've had a wicked month. I wrote about my experience at a 3-day retreat playing the 7-part pact for 3 days. This is a game where 7 players sit around the table playing 7 wizards. It has been described as the Twilight Imperium of role-playing games, and I've got a long interview with the designer J Dragon as well. I wrote about the brilliant neo-gothic RPG Doom Song and why the grand campaign it comes with is just fantastic, and also why I haven't played it yet. I've got a follow-up interview with the designer of Mythic Bastionland, talking about some of the criticisms I made in the last Quinns Quest review. I launched a new feature, Quinns' Campaign Diaries, getting into the dweeby details of a game that I'm playing right now that I plan to review in 2026. Honestly, it's become like a reverse agony aunt column where like my readers just help me with shit. And then dropping on the fan club today, I've got a brand new baby video talking about an RPG that I don't have with me. Hang on. Yezaba's Bed and Breakfast. So this is a bit like how, to accompany the Delta Green video review, I did an accompanying video talking about Delta Green, God's Teeth. This is my counterpart to the Triangle Agency video, because this game is also wildly ambitious, has hundreds of pages of unlockable content. It is absolutely going to be someone's favorite RPG of all time. It's just not gonna be mine. But also, I just had to find somewhere to talk about it on Quinns Quest, because contained within this book's interestingly countercultural structure were about 50 bits that made me slap my head and go, oh my goodness, that's genius. And I want to tell you about them. Also dropping on the fan club today is my interview with the designers of Triangle Agency, and this is just a great listen, both because both of the designers are absolute geniuses, but also because you can hear the genuine tension on that call as I ask about creative decisions that I didn't understand. If you're not a member of the Quinns Quest fan club, you don't know what you're missing. I mean, you do know what you're missing because I just told you, but yeah. That take was rubbish. Can we do that again? I'm coming, sorry, I'm coming, sorry, I was just having lunch. Woo! Ah! Okay, so according to my diagram, we're gonna start this by talking about the actual missions that players go on in Triangle Agency. So Triangle Agency is a game that's contorting itself like a yoga master to have a non-traditional structure, but in as much as that is inescapable, these missions are its traditional structure. So to recap, missions in Triangle Agency are like investigations into magical realist interpretations of magical thinking. Something weird is happening somewhere because someone has had a thought so strong that the thought has become self-aware and is trying to help with varying degrees of success and literalness and compassion. So the core book has one very brief example of what that might look like, which is a sandwich artist working at a Subway has become obsessed with keeping ingredients inside the sandwich, creating an anomaly that looks for when human beings fail to keep ingredients inside a sandwich, and when that happens, it punishes them by turning them into sort of a reverse sandwich, putting their insides on the outside. So then the players around the table, armed only with this hateful handful of d6s and some character sheets that are simply too much, and each other have to figure out what's happening that's weird and locate the anomaly. But that's actually only part of the puzzle, because to lure it into your mousetrap-like agency issue briefcase, you first need to either satisfy it or confuse it or remove its reason for being, which is a puzzle of its own that probably involves figuring out whose rancid mind it was birthed from. Now, before I get into the business of complaining about this puzzle for upwards of like 7 minutes, I'll point out that the agency does also give your player characters a gun, with which they can circumnavigate this whole puzzle by just shooting the anomaly. The gun always works, the mission will always end there. But my players never use the gun, because Triangle Agency doesn't want you to use the gun. If you sympathize with the anomalies, you're not going to want to use the gun. And also, if you want to play the game, if you believe in what the Games Master's doing, you also don't want to shut down the mission. So here's what I'd say. If you're a GM running Triangle Agency, encourage your players to use the gun. My mission with Quinns Quest is to celebrate games that make role-playing easier. Because while I'm out here encouraging all of you would-be GMs to believe role-playing is easy, GMing is great fun to do badly, I'm doing so because without that, none of us would ever get started. The fact is, and I'm loath to admit this unless I absolutely have to, GMing is hard. Jesus, just being a good player is hard. So with Quinns Quest, I'm just out here trying to point people towards games that make having a great time easier. So, If I'm reviewing an investigation game in which players are going to be entering situations without the foggiest idea of what's going on, I want the game to make it easy for players to make steady, satisfying progress towards a conclusion. And ideally, not only is the GM not breaking a sweat, but they look really good at their job. For example, a couple of episodes ago, I reviewed Delta Green, a game that says, hey, here are a bunch of investigations with a bunch of threads for players to pull on, and a rule set that says, if a player character has a skill, like telling when someone is lying or looking for criminal forensics or hacking a computer, they just pass most of the time. The players just have to point their characters like metal detectors in the right direction, and the room just gives way to another room. Metaphorically. But also sometimes literally, because we got Lovecraft non-Euclidean geometry going on. So let's start with this problem. Triangle agency is literally the opposite. Page 45. Quote, there are no skill checks in triangle agency because we know you will fail at anything risky or difficult that you attempt. Anytime you think this might not work, take our word for it, it won't. So in triangle agency, whenever the players encounter any obstacle, like trying to gain access to someone's house or trying to wrestle a giant millipede to the ground, the GM just goes straight to narrating them failing unless they use one of their super cool anomalous powers, like, I don't know, the I know a shortcut ability of the manifold anomaly that means you can just say, I know a shortcut, and get into someone's basement by squeezing into your car's glove compartment. Or if you need to fight a millipede, you can say, I know a shortcut, and enter a cupboard, and then re-emerge through a second-story window and just elbow drop them. And to be clear, this is one of the rules that when I first read the book, sold me on running a campaign of Triangle Agency. Are you kidding? That shit is hilarious. And it's elevated even further because every single anomalous power in this book has a very funny result if you roll the dice and fail. Like if you fail the dice roll for I know a shortcut, it's on a failure, your shortcut leads somewhere very inconvenient instead of the desired location. Your whole team's fighting a big millipede. You go, I know a shortcut, you climb into a cupboard and emerge in your ex-wife's house. But she can't know you're in triangle agency, so while the rest of your team is still fighting the millipede, now you're role-playing a scene where you're trying to explain why you just broke into her house. Let me just give you a real example of this from my home game that also serves as like a pocket review of Triangle Agency. So much that's right and so much that's wrong about this game is contained in this story. So in our very first session, my players were trying to get access to a house because they knew something weird was happening inside it. And someone used an anomalous power to create a massive sewage backflow in all the toilets in the house. And then they showed up pretending to be weirdly well-dressed plumbers. But the role-playing involved in this was so complicated, and the chain of causality was so long that when my players entered the house, they proceeded to investigate the sewage as the weird thing that was happening here, forgetting that they had caused it. Now, on the one hand, role-playing doesn't get better than that, right? That is precisely the kind of farcical shit that when it happens in actual play shows, people animate it and it goes viral. It's just that when we stopped laughing, my players were all further away from solving the mission than they had been 30 minutes ago. And this is my big problem with Triangle Agency's investigations. As a GM, I could never relax. I never fully felt like I was doing a good job. I was just grommet, building out the train tracks, trying to create a path that would lead my players towards this being over. Triangle Agency is so thought-provoking to read, but when you actually take its zesty high concept that magical thinking can create real problems and then get it to the table, I just personally found it was like sandpaper for the amount of friction it created. The reality of Triangle Agency, if you will, is that players don't know what they're investigating or why the anomaly is doing it, or even what it can do or where it's coming from, or how it's misinterpreting its creator's desires. But are the players at least given tools to do with reading minds or detecting toxic thoughts or understanding what objects here might be anomalous? No! You were given the most Looney Tunes-ass grab bag of powers like dicking with gravity or wrapping your skin around people like a human tanuki scrotum or deleting people, but if it goes badly, they explode. But if this was stressful for me, the GM, my players were just having terrific individual scenes and moments. I'm thinking about when I had a player accidentally summon an evil twin out of a refrigerator who immediately stole the player's company car. Or I had the player who could control time, always making sure there was enough time for the players by just looking at a clock and confidently declaring, we have time. Except whenever he failed, he was, and I quote, catastrophically wrong. If Delta Green is competency porn, Triangle Agency is failure porn. My players and I loved failures in this game. I actually, though, don't think they happen often enough. The odds of rolling no threes on 64 are about 17%, which means you might have a really funny failure state for your power that never comes up in the entire campaign. Anyway, my point is that whether players fail their rolls or succeed but are just doing something silly, it is very funny in Triangle Agency when players accidentally turn restaurants inside out or turn NPCs into stuffed animals. But there's me, the GM, laughing through the tears because there were clues in how that restaurant was laid out. Those NPCs had something to say. So my players had a blast, but for me, I was just constantly pulling fixes out of my ass, which for my hypervigilant ass just made me feel like Principal Skinner serving steamed hams. And look, maybe if you're a less hypervigilant GM than me, you'd revel in the chaos. Like, literally, every time a player uses a power, they actually generate this currency called chaos for every die that isn't a 3. And the anomaly through the GM can then spend that chaos generated by the players to do anything from changing their environment to bringing one of the players' family members into the mission, or you can just kill someone. And like, Jesus, I don't know where this fits into the review, but another reason I was so stressed running Triangle Agency is there are just so many rules in this game. So many more than you'd expect for just a silly game that wants to make people laugh. And I was just sweating, trying not to miss any of the triggers. That's a merit, that's a demerit. I gotta spend my chaos. Your relationship just degraded one step. So anyway, yeah, in addition to the GM having this like constant drip feed of chaos, which both forces you to do things when you're busy, just trying to keep the game on the rails, but also limits you from doing stuff you might want to do anyway, because actually the anomaly locking all toilets in a 5-mile radius would be this category of action that costs this much chaos. So do you have it? And let's do this procedure. And then while this is happening, the players are amassing merits and demerits for all these absurdist, ever-changing criteria, which is very corporate and is very funny, but also, like, spoilers, but there are so many ways for people to get merits and demerits in this book, and so few ways to spend them or use them that are actually a little pointless. And even as I'm complaining about this, I can feel in my belly like I'm sort of barking up the wrong tree here, because it's me taking a game that's silly and then taking the silly rules and then complaining that they're not more serious. And then the game starts to feel like a high concept joke at the GM's and the player's expense. And this is in fact one of the ways that this game is arguably successful, because this was intended by the designers. Let's visit them quickly in my knowledge tower.
One thing that I also remember from my time working with kids in D&D is that they love an opportunity to pants the teacher, metaphorically.
Yes.
They cannot wait to see this authority figure kind of look like a buffoon or sort of get stymied. And I really think that's something that's been baked into, I think, this game from the jump, is trying to make the most pantsable, you know, like a boss that you just love to hate.
Our goal with the GMing of this game was, can we remove the vast majority of the power the GM typically holds, while pretending in the text of the game that the GM has more power, has like an extra level of power. So when you look at the mechanics of the game, you see a lot of stuff the GM is normally responsible for sprinkled into the player's hands.
So that is fun. It's just that Triangle Agency is kind of an enigma. In addition to dismantling traditional play structures and teaching you to play loose and silly, it is also building just utterly unhinged, fiddly structures of its own, and I don't think they always work. Like, just let me walk you through how a player using their power actually works. So in Triangle Agency, you first declare the power you're using, and then other players can go and pee or get a drink, because this is going to take somewhere between 2 and 5 minutes. I'm going to use as my example the one power that all players have that the agency actually gives you. Strap in. Step 1. Following the restrictions that you can only affect what you haven't perceived and can't change folks' free will, you state an effect you want to occur. Step 2. You need to name a series of mundane events that occurred to cause this effect. Step 3, you name which of your stats are embodying or enhancing with this change. There are 9 stats in this game because 3 times 3 is 9. Then you roll 64. If you got at least 1 3, that's a success. If you got 3 3s, that's a crit. with its own rules, where you can go shopping for one of 3 different benefits. This is where your stat comes in. You can choose to lower your stat by 1 for each die you want to spin to a 3, although if you currently have 0 in that stat, you in fact must take 1 die showing a 3 and knock it over. Then I've lost count. For every die that doesn't show a 3, you generate 1 chaos, which is a separate currency that must be spent by the GM at a shop which has its own rules. And like, lads, did you consider using the Powered by the Apocalypse rules? What the is going on with this? If it ain't broke, let's build a nuclear reactor in our garden from scratch. Now, part of me does admire the fact that this is a game about being in an absurd bureaucracy. Like, look at how many players' character sheets there are. So having this, like, 9-step bureaucratic process when you want to change reality is kind of thematic. But the part of me that admires it is not the same part that had to play with these rules every week and watch my players get parts of the rules wrong and then correct them. And it's not just that some of the procedures in this game are really long and clunky. Some of the powers are also bruisingly non-specific about how they work. Like, it's maybe tolerable to have a 12-step process to resolve a skill check. It's not tolerable to have an argument in the middle of that process because a player's power says it can only be used on mundane objects and is a car that's being manipulated by an anomaly, now a mundane object. Maybe the designers of this game could have spent a little less time in the editing process bolding all the 3s in this book and instead bolding some keywords, mundane and anomalous. In my experience, Triangle Agency really dredges up that most tedious commonality of all role-playing games, which is the sort of small claims court of the imagination where players lean on the most generous interpretation of the rules to their character. This book, in being a game about literally bending or breaking reality, saw more of these GM player arguments than any other game I've played recently. In another RPG, the GM can lean on what's realistic in the fiction, which we can't have because this is a game where reality is melting, or it has the precise legal lettering of the rules, which Triangle Agency doesn't have, because in addition to not having an index, which just, what were they thinking? Triangle Agency is written in 3 different plot-heavy, biased voices, as if it's in-universe paperwork, all of which is great for holding your attention and making you laugh when you're reading it for the first time, and makes it awful as a reference book. So GMing this game feels like being the wayward dictator of an unlikable regime based on vibes. If there's a kind of GM who would probably really get on with this game, it's someone who reads like a third of the book, maybe once, then never opens it during the game, and just plays out what they roughly remember the feel of the book was like. In other words, an animal. Couldn't be me. I literally started Quinns Quest because I needed more people to know about how modern role-playing games swaddle your experience as if in a blanket. I'm talking about rule sets that are easy to read, easy to learn, easy to teach, and just result in a more robust, reliable, good time for everyone. With Triangle Agency, I could just never shake the feeling that maybe the designers had something wrong, maybe the teach in the book had something wrong, maybe I had something wrong. But in the end, I didn't know if I should start dropping parts of the rule set mid-session because they weren't adding anything. So I asked the designers of Triangle Agency if at any point they were thinking about making a simpler game. Here's what they said.
Sean might have a different opinion here, but I never really considered making it simpler for 2 reasons. One is that something we were hoping for, especially in the early stages when we were working on this game, was like, even if it doesn't hit, like, and people don't like it and our Kickstarter doesn't do well, this will be our chance to like put a bunch of our ideas and thoughts and opinions on game design into a product that can be kind of a gift to the other people who are creating. Like, can we make a big meal for everybody to like look at and think about and have opinions on? And then the second thing is that our game is a lot about consequence and about the sort of complicated unfurling of small actions or small choices into more complicated and difficult plates to spin. And part of making that work is having each time you unfurl something or each time you unlock something, giving you that feeling of like, oh no, this is not just a new tool, it's also a new plate to spin.
So maybe at your table, that authorial intent will come through a little more. For me, I just felt like me, the GM, and this book were never quite on the same page. And here is where the vault could have saved me. This is something sold by the Triangle Agency developers that is a beautiful hardback or PDF containing 12 investigations by 12 different designers. And usually, with a game like, for example, Mothership, a published module is what I reach for to give me demonstrations of how all the ideas and rules in the core book cohere into a straightforward evening of play that players can get their teeth into, that will teach them about the world and their adversaries, and teach me how to keep the challenge challenging, the story storying, and the pace pacey. And I found out, after running a couple of investigations from this book and reading a few more, that this book is not what I wanted. Basically, rather than taking all of Triangle Agency's colorful bluster and then saying, okay, enough silliness, here's the experience you want your players to have, this book actually further pulls Triangle Agency in yet more directions. Because as the designers told me, what this book really is 12 different people's interpretations of how to run Triangle Agency. And some of those people have never even played the game. And it is full of great ideas. It definitely shows the breadth of stuff you might explore with this game. From an 8-bit video game taking over reality and forcing the players to go on bullshit quests, to an anomaly that ties together themes of skincare and historical Spanish colonialism, to the players disappearing into what is basically a traffic app. It's great to read, but it didn't answer the question I actually had, which was, can my game nights be any less exhausting? In fact, I'm definitely not saying you shouldn't buy The Vault, but this is a crazy recommendation. I might suggest you buy it and read it after your campaign of Triangle Agency, because I think this book steered me in completely the wrong direction. Because the investigations in this book are all literally investigations. They're nuanced and long and complicated and multifaceted. If I'd never read The Vault, I think there's a much better chance I would have read Triangle Agency and gone, whew, there is so much going on here. This game is a farce. I'm going to give my players literally the simplest possible problems and then watch their own incompetence and comedy balloon these obstacles outwards to fill an evening. But now, good news everyone, with my complaint gland fully disgorged, I am going to move on to the part of Triangle Agency that I just straightforwardly loved. It was a laugh riot. I got no complaints. I got some complaints. I gotta cool off in more ways than one. It is so hot in this room. The lights are baking me. All the windows are sealed. I'm sweating through this shirt, which I think is made of heat retardant fabric. And I'm doing it for you. So, between these investigations, which would have had my subconscious magical thinking trying to manifest an aspirin, you do simple scenes in and around your characters' home lives. And where the rest of Triangle Agency can feel like a coked up hipster game designer running towards you covered in sticky notes, this part of the game is just one simple, great idea. So in addition to choosing your character's anomaly and their job at Triangle Agency, you choose why their home life is also terrible. It's 3. You see, you get 3 supplemental character sheets because there's 3, because a triangle has 3 sides, because the number of sides a triangle has is 3. I hate it! I don't hate it. It's all right, I guess. Maybe you're horrifically overbooked, maybe you're broke, maybe you're a caretaker of someone or something needy, maybe you're a creature who's only pretending to be human. Or whatever you choose, you then create 3 characters who are... I've just realized it's another 3. It's a secret 3 I didn't realize till I was reading my script. Ah! So let's say you're just the caretaker of a baby. You might create your terrible mother who'll get custody if you're gone, your bowling teammate who misses you deeply, and the zookeeper who, for whatever reason, your baby loves so much more than you. And then those 3 characters are played by the other players at the table. This means that in my home game, each of my 4 players played 4 characters, their own player character, and then 3 characters, each of whom were deeply important to somebody else. Like the player in my game who was the CEO had as his 3 relationships his husband, Mark, his ex-husband, Mark, and the child who, with his ex-husband, were pretty unified in thinking he was a cock. And then what's also really nice is there's just immediately going to be so much diversity in these relationships because characters pick different backgrounds. Like maybe one player is in love all the time and another player is just wanted by the cops. And then what happens next is like miraculous. From session 1 of Triangle Agency, you're immediately playing with this whole TV show worth of characters who are all diverse and memorable. And what's the GM doing in all of this? Nothing. Watching. Laughing. It's so unlike the investigations of Triangle Agency, which at my table was so chaotic and just dense with obstacles and dice rolls and rules queries and confusion. And then you have just this whole other half of Triangle Agency, which is so simple and so good. With the home lives, we just did the scenes we wanted, which were the scenes we were the most excited by or that we knew would be funniest. And then the moment we were done with those scenes, we chose to move on. And you know what? In this other freeform area of the game, sometimes we did include Triangle Agency's fiddly-ass rules. But we did it on our terms. We did it when we wanted, when it added to the game. And you know what really funny discovery I had during this? My players were so good at playing NPCs, whether it was someone's woe-begotten ex-husband or an inexplicably cool zookeeper. They actually did a better job of playing these NPCs than they did their own characters often. Isn't that crazy? So like, why did these characters pop so much? I think at least part of it is that this is a contemporary RPG, so you can get a player to roleplay a zookeeper without them being like, oh, hang on, wait, what do I need to know about zookeepers in this universe? But also, I think it's because lots of players, myself included, tend to make their player characters really complicated, right? You have your backstory, skills, and stats. Then as you play, you start getting secrets. You get things that happened last session, get things you want to achieve. And the core of improvisation, improv comedy, improv and role-playing is your relationship, is the situation, and is listening. And Triangle Agency with these NPCs that players play throws away everything except that stuff. So in these home life scenes, you're not thinking about the fact that your character's good at bowling, but they haven't been good at bowling recently, but they met someone on Tinder and they're thinking about that and they have a PhD in civil engineering. No, you have one note, one. And it's that since they had a baby, you miss them so much that you are being weird about it. And it's great. It's great. Which means, mega unexpectedly, that contained within this book, like the flesh inside a recalcitrant walnut, is one of the best games ever for getting a table of players better at role-playing or comedy or even improv comedy. What? But I mentioned that my complaint gland has a squirt of juice left in it. The thing about these home life roleplay scenes is that as players choose how they spend free time, which is a mechanic we'll get to in a little bit, players are expected to roleplay not just their overbooked home life, but also scenes within Triangle Agency and even talking to the anomaly that's fused with their subconscious like tea through a strainer. The book straight up tells you to do this. The arc of the story you're telling will be players in one way or another working with or against Triangle Agency, so those scenes become important, which means I find it unbelievable that in a game about anomalies, where the players are anomalies, and the book tells you to do scenes where the players talk to their anomalies, which is basically the player talking to themselves, there is not, as far as I know, a single word in this book telling you what that should look like. So just make it up, Quinns. I can't do that. It's more complicated than that because everything in Triangle Agency is more complicated than that. Listen, there is so much world building here about what an anomaly is or secretly is, or how you can expect to interact with it and how you might interact with it eventually. But also what Triangle Agency is or secretly is, or how you can expect to interact with it and how you can expect to interact with it eventually. And because the back of the book has all of these secrets that we'll get to in a moment, the players are going to be reading by themselves, there's a pressure to like stick to the canon of what Triangle Agency and the anomalies are, or act like they are, or think they are. And sticking to the canon is made so much harder because, like, you know how RPG books generally, and with mixed degrees of success, are written in a way to try and make it as easy as possible for the GM to run? Triangle Agency instead had the idea of presenting the entire book in a voice. In fact, 3 distinct voices. And I'm not comfortable with calling this an inherently bad thing. It is what has won this game a lot of attention. You see, most of this book is written like an in-universe document from Triangle Agency with that Orwellian corporate voice. There's even a totally cracked out recurring reference in the book to how the players at the table only think they are playing a game when in fact they really are the player characters, but they imagine they're playing that character as a role, and when they do that, it's easier for them to reshape reality. And then the very next segment of the book sees an anomaly kind of taking over, like hacking this presentation you're getting, and in a fun bit of layout work, it goes wild and tells you that everything you've read is a lie. And all of that is obviously super creative, and it's actually the designers doing something that I encourage all designers to do, which is drawing on their own lived experiences.
think like with any art, bringing in a skill set and information from a space that the audience and typical creators of that art form aren't familiar with can help make your stuff look unique and different. Mine is that I've spent years working on trying to make really catchy voices, for kids, like figure out how to write books in first person. And so my whole career before this was about voice. And so when we came to writing the role-playing game, it was like, well, can we take advantage of that?
In a past life, I straight up was responsible for creating a genuine company handbook for employees. And so I had all of this stuff rattling around in my brain, just sitting there taking up hard disk space.
So, credit where it's due, all of this makes this a fantastic book just to buy and read, and also makes it so much worse for how to actually run the game. Reading the corporate voice of Triangle Agency for dozens and dozens of pages did make adopting the voice of the company effortless for me. So that's good. But it made unveiling the layers of what the company is secretly doing or which of its threats it would really act on absolutely impossible because this voice is misleading you. It's not even just biased. You read the first 137 pages and the very next page calls you an idiot. So I could boss my players around all day long, but when they started pushing back against Triangle Agency or amassing demerits or shock horror, actually investigating the company, between game nights, I was left anxiously scanning this 300-page book, looking for answers that I'm still not sure if are in here or if I just missed. Like a Christian in a crisis of faith anxiously scanning the Bible. Or like this book spends so much time with the corporation saying anomalies are dangerous aberrations of science. And then you've got this anomaly speaking to you saying, none of that's true. And that is fun. But if you're like me, when suddenly you're tasked with doing scenes where the players' anomalies talk to them, you'll realize that you don't actually know what you're doing. Like, I'm cool, I can hang, I promise. I think the idea of an RPG rulebook which argues with itself like two divorcing parents is a real sweet avant-garde idea. But it's just that, like, sometimes when my friends are coming over for a game night and I have to do my job as a GM and I'm confused about something, I like to know if I missed it in the book or if I missed it in the subtext or if it's in the book at all! So, while I did love doing my players' home scenes, and they were definitely simpler than the investigations, I was still left grasping for how to do the more complicated scenes in Triangle Agency or with the anomalies. And in any other role-playing game, I could just invent that, but I couldn't do that in Triangle Agency because, let's move on to part 3. And this is a cool feature that I haven't talked about yet, and it may well be the defining cultural innovation of Triangle Agency in our community. It's a super cool idea, and I was sure it was going to be the most uncomplicatedly excellent part of this game. No. Although maybe that one's on me. Like, how did I think anything in this game was going to be uncomplicated? All right, let's get some energy up as I enter the final furlong. Inspired, perhaps, by legacy board games that have little boxes full of components and secrets and mechanics that unlock as you play, Triangle Agency has, in the back of the book, an avalanche of additional rules and world building that players are going to unlock and spill out onto your table over the course of a campaign. A whopping 95 pages of it, in fact. All dense with copywriting. And if you play a full campaign, you could expect maybe 70 pages of it to come out. Although, I'll mention here that there will be no spoilers in this review. Just think of it like, you know how in a lot of RPGs your character levels up and then unlocks a cool new power? Triangle Agency says, yeah, how about as you level up, we're going to dismantle the entire concept of an RPG under your feet, and we're going to do it at different rates and in different ways for different players. This is the problem with being a games journalist. You get into this job because you want games to be wild and innovate. And then when they try and do that, you're the one that says, yeah, that didn't work. Here's how it works. After each investigation, players decide how they're going to allocate a few units of free time. Is their characters going to focus on their job at the agency, which is good? Are they going to focus on their personal life, which is frowned upon? Or are they going to spend time with the dangerous anomaly they're fused with, which Triangle Agency says they should never do? But obviously there's a whole ass progress bar full of unlocks and there's no punishment on Earth you could threaten a player with that would cause them to lose interest in or deviate from a progress bar full of unlocks. And then each time a player hits one of these letter codes, they turn to the corresponding passage in the book and read it privately. And often that means a whole new power, but it might also mean a whole new shop. of powers. It might mean a subversive bit of world building that now only you know. It might also mean the next time you roll the dice pool, you get to chuck in the D12 with a floating eyeball in it, and the other players are going to be like, what the heck is that? And you're going to be like, never you mind. And then baked into the system of these tracks is actually how your campaign of Triangle Agency will naturally or unnaturally end. Because players can't explore all the tracks, they have to kind of pick and choose. And then players are going to want to focus on different tracks, because obviously, if no one's becoming a corporate stooge, then at least one player is going to want to have all that unique content and secrets that come from being a corporate stooge, which means, actually, and quite beautifully, as the campaign goes on, your player's perception of reality will start to drift apart. And just like that, your campaign of Triangle Agency will build like a shaken can of soda towards a laughably ambitious and deranged conclusion in which, best case scenario, the band breaks up, and worst case scenario, reality breaks up. And again, this is one of the things that had me hyped to run Triangle Agency, because one of the best ways for a GM to delight their players is just to give them some cool handout that the game gave the GM. Here's a secret that only you get to read. So imagine my disappointment when no more than like 4 sessions into Triangle Agency, my players began just skim reading these unlocks and not drawing their content into the game at all. Why was that? Okay, so I've talked about how in areas of this game, it's just carnage to keep on the rails, right? And part of that is because this game's rules play about as smoothly as a bag of lizards trying to find its way down the staircase. You know what makes that worse? A shipment of new rules being added every other session, but it gets worse. Some players are playing with them, but not others. And where there's not only no cheat sheet, if you want a reference for what you've unlocked, you've got A1, X6, and P7. It's like playing D&D if the player's handbook had been run through a shredder. Also, like, you know how contained within the extrasensory obstacle course that is being a GM, there's that unfortunate truth that an individual player cannot be relied upon to remember the rules or the secrets that are theirs and theirs alone. Like, part of being a GM is taking a player to one side and being like, hey, you know, you haven't really used that plot thread of you being a spy for the villain. Or like, Sarah, you've never used that ability. Do you want me to run you through how it works again? You know what makes that part of the job just the worst? This stuff. Just a few sessions into my campaign, I began losing track of everyone's secrets and rules because they were secret. And I told my players it had to be their job to be on top of them. Basically, I just checked out. And then maybe 1 or 2 sessions later, my players checked out as well. Because why would they be interested in 8 disparate pages of hard-to-pass rules when clearly the best part of the game we were playing was their baby's inexplicable obsession with that zookeeper? Emotionally, legally, narratively, my players' cups were just full. Like, after character creation, before we even had session 1, if you count the anomalies, we had 20 characters at the table. Before we started playing, the rules were already too much. So then, of course, when you put an entire page of cryptic, tiny text in front of them that, of course, they're reading on their phones because there's only one book to go around, but then also what they're reading is a unique kind of gnomic secret, so no one else at the table is going to know or even necessarily care if that player brings their secret into the roleplay or not. You can guess what happened next, which was nothing. My players didn't buy from the new shops. They didn't follow the new plot twists. They'd still read their unlockable secrets with interest, but only in the way that you'd read a role-playing game manual that you're not actually intending on playing. And at that point, when I as the GM was just sweating to run this game as intended, and my players weren't doing the bare minimum on their end to run this game as intended, I did what this book heavily implies should happen in a game of Triangle Agency. I rebelled against the agency. It's just that I think this book expects the players to do it, where it was me. It was the GM. I said no. I said, we're not doing any more investigations or any more unlocks. Players, you can roll your stupid dice pools if you want, but know that I am done telling you what you can and can't do. Because in our story, you've dicked around enough that reality is now melting around you. And I'm going to make this final session about your stupid or pathetic or hateful or selfish characters, where I pull in only my favorite random events from the quote weather table in this book, representing the breakdown of reality, and which is, like everything in Triangle Agency, a mix of the funniest ideas you've ever read and also stuff that I think they should have cut. And you know what? It was one of the greatest role-playing sessions I have ever had. It was touching and sad and still very, very funny as my players tried and mostly failed to give emotional resolution to all their relationships. And we couldn't stop laughing the entire time thanks to scenes that had twists like guilt weighs heavily on the world, everyone is filled with apology and regret, so my players spent a car ride back to HQ trying to apologize to each other for everything that had happened in the campaign. But then that same scene had another twist, reading that none of the characters are allowed to forgive each other for anything. And then with a final scene that gives me chills to even think about, where my player characters all kind of became self-aware and realized they were in a role-playing game, we literally closed the book on Triangle Agency, with my players saying that game was wicked, and me saying, so help me God, if I ever open this book again, I'm doing some kind of Snyder cut. I'm going to break apart this book like I'm butterflying a roast chicken, and the moment that any of its ideas give me any frustration, they're going straight in the bin like a bone. And if I understand the designers of Triangle Agency well, I think actually that's a conclusion that they would totally approve of. So, in conclusion, do I recommend you buy Triangle Agency? I mean, yeah, kinda. I think contained within this game, in the same way that Michelangelo could excavate sculptures from a block of marble, is maybe the funniest and possibly even the most transcendent TTRPG ever made. I think I believe that. And certainly, if you're the kind of person who buys TTRPG books just to have lovely objects that it's enjoyable to read, sure, great. Buy this book straight away. Oh no. Oh no, oh wow. You know, I was just thinking to myself that when I said that deboning line, it would be awful and inappropriate if I damaged this book. That's crazy. You know what that is, baby? That's magical thinking. As to who I'd recommend actually play Triangle Agency, it's probably groups at the two extremes. So on the one end, I think it's groups of players who are so invested in avant-garde TTRPG rule sets that everyone at the table can be relied upon to shoulder the weight of this game with its weird rules and weird world building and all the secrets and ideas and questions and conflicts that come belching up out of this book. So basically, it's something like a whole table of GMs. Or at completely the other end of the spectrum, I think a group that would have tons of fun with this game is basically a whole table full of Chaos Goblins who are totally unbothered with playing the game as written. For a GM who's going to like read the book once and then not open it again and operate it based solely on vibes, and players who are just going to take the ideas that make them laugh and then run around with them like teenagers toilet papering a house. And with that, that is the end of this review. Thank you so much for bearing with me, everybody. Reviews that are not just straightforwardly positive are so much harder to write. So thanks to the Quinns Cross patrons for supporting me on the journey of writing this script. This was challenging. Thank you so much as well to Caleb and Sean for making just such a fascinating game. Let's hear from them one more time with some recommendations of other games that they recommend.
Okay, so I have two. First one is I want to point people toward Moonlight on Roseville Beach from Our Rook Studio. It is a very small, very easy to learn game that is most compelling because of its setting. Paranormal investigation on an island community that is almost entirely made up of queer people. Richard Dwayne is an unbelievably good writer of character and place, and there is it's a really, really amazing setting guide, even if you don't play with the mechanics within, which are also really interesting and doing some stuff I have not seen too much talk about, so check that out. And then my other thing is the game I've played the most this year. I recommend everybody here go to J-Dragon's Patreon and get access to 7-Part Pact if you're looking for another ambitious and big and complicated game that changes a lot based on your interpretation of it. It's so good, and you can play a playtest version really, really early by just a true genius of game design. So check it out.
I just want to shout out Rom-Com Drama Bomb by Elliot Davis. Most fun I've had playing a TTRPG in the recent past. It's a 3-player game. two of you are trapped in a romantic comedy, and like literally trapped because the third person is a supervillain who is pushing you into following the rom-com tropes and has a bomb strapped to your chest in case it doesn't work out the way that they want. Just having a game that puts you into that tension and keeps you all like eyes on the clock and also hitting these big dramatic beats. Yum, 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 yum. It's delicious candy and I love it, love it, love it.
Thank you so much for watching, everybody. If you... What the shit?
Well met. I'm the Knowledge Knight. I can help you in your quest for knowledge.
My what?
We're going to be best friends.
Oh, I don't like where this is going.
If you don't like where you're going, why not go on a quest with